Investors. This is DAFTARI from DAFTARI Investments, and welcome to the show, Talk for Investments. That's TFI. Today we have Mr. Rajesh Jayaraman, who is Deputy Head Product Management of Nippon India AMC. His total experience stands to be of 19 years with mutual fund industry, which is almost 2 decades, and he has been associated with Nippon AMC since last 14 years. He takes care about for all the product designing and the product communication part. He is also associated from research to banking to MS services. So, sir, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So, sir, I would like you to brief something about Nippon
Sure.
to our investors.
Yeah, sure. So most of you would be familiar with our asset management company. We have been in existence since 1995, so it's fairly long time. So obviously the name change has happened, and Nippon Life, which is one of the leading insurers worldwide, in fact one of the largest private insurers in Japan, and among the top 10 insurers worldwide, is the sponsor company, and which is why Nippon India Mutual Fund. A lot of history as far as India is concerned. Even globally, the parent company has had a century plus years of existence. So just like any typical large global brand, there's a lot of emphasis on processes, on systems, and everything else is a derivative of that. So the performance and all is more of an output. So our constant focus is to keep delighting our customers across market conditions, across all our product offerings which we have. In fact, incidentally, we offer a very large bouquet of products from mutual funds to exchange traded funds to index funds, and a mix of that called the hybrid kind of products as well.
Okay. Sir, before I forget, I would like to congratulate Nippon team for crossing 2,000 rupees NAV price for Nippon India growth
Nice.
in last 25 years. So which significantly had a calculation of 1 lakh invested in 1995 became 2 CR in
Right.
the span of 25 years. So
Right.
congratulations to your whole team.
Sure.
So going ahead, we today would like to discuss about a specific kind of product, and that's the balance advantage fund.
Right.
So, sir, just one small request. I would be happy if we can have this conversation with English and Hindi version as well, because
Sure.
many of our investors will be able to understand. So, going ahead, I would like to introduce what is a BAF or Balance Advantage Fund in the industry.
Right. So basically, balance advantage fund belongs to a category called as dynamic equity kind of category, dynamic asset allocation kind of fund category. So the name itself actually tells you what this product attempts to do. So it is like a equity offering. Equity allocation is rebalanced at a very regular kind of frequency, maybe monthly, maybe weekly, depending upon what kind of models people follow. Also, there is a lot of the dynamic funds in the industry follow a particular model. So what I mean by model is we look at various parameters basis which the decision is made as to what is the optimal equity allocation, या फिर कितना equity होना चाहिए इस समय के अनुसार, क्योंकि हमने देखा कि हर समय में मार्केट में जो वैल्यूएशन है वो कभी ज्यादा कभी कम, जो मार्केट कंडीशंस है कभी पॉजिटिव होती है कभी नेगेटिव होती है इक्विटीज के लिए. तो उस हिसाब से दिस फंड ट्राइज टू मैन्यूवर द इक्विटी एलोकेशन, मैनेज द इक्विटी एलोकेशन इन अ वेरी dynamic manner. So the end output which the product tries to give to investors is to try and give equity like returns, very close to equity like returns, but with a much lower volatility than pure equity funds. So you could say the attempt is कि थोड़ा डेट से बेहतर रिटर्न बनाए, लेकिन इक्विटी की तरह वॉलेटिलिटी भी नहीं दे और कहीं ना कहीं इक्विटी के रिटर्न्स को थोड़ा बहुत कैप्चर भी कर ले इसके अंदर.
Okay, so sir, basically this is a fund manager's call कि कभी उसको इक्विटी ज्यादा करना है या डेट ज्यादा करना है. ये फंड मैनेजर will be taking this decision seeing the current market.
Right. So this is a very interesting question you have brought it up. हमने जो देखा है टिपिकली हम जब बात करते हैं कि नॉर्मली आम इन्वेस्टर की तरह जो हम सब इंडिविजुअल लेवल पे इन्वेस्टर्स हैं, तो वन ऑफ द मिस्टेक्स वी टेंड टू डू इज वी ऑल हैव एन इमोशनल बायस because when we look at markets doing very well, we would not really cut down our allocation. Profit booking becomes difficult. It's not easy to take a call. Correct? We don't know कि आज कर लिया कल और market आके चल गया. Reverse भी होता है. When things look really bad, all of us would want to run away from equities. For example, last year, if we saw when the markets were very volatile, we had seen large number of SIPs getting stopped, despite the fact that SIP आप करते हो कि volatility को आप beat कर सके and benefit from volatility. Correct? So herein, what all of us or large part of the funds do in this particular category is there is a model to avoid this emotion-based allocation to equities. Because what happens is at an individual level, all of us have our own biases, thought process. तो कभी मुझे equity अच्छा लगेगा और किसी को debt अच्छा लगेगा, तो मेरा उस decision पे भी एक कहीं ना कहीं influence करेगा कि मुझे equity कितना रखना चाहिए. तो इसके लिए हम बोल रहे हैं कि unbiased, objective decision making के लिए what we use a model here. We just look at some quantitative parameters जिसको define कर सकते हैं कि उसके basis पे equity कितना होना चाहिए, कम या ज्यादा, उस allocation पे हम लोग आते हैं. So it's purely dictated by the model, not by the fund manager.
Okay. So going ahead, we have a balance advantage fund of Nippon. So two things I wanted to stress upon. One is, can you explain about the fund to our investors? And second part is, what is the current strategy?
Sure.
So again, completing my question, when I'm mentioning about the current strategy, there are mixed kind of investors, as you mentioned about the emotional part. So there are people with a thinking with a view that the market is at top because every day it's a 52 weeks high. So people are with mixed emotions. Some are with an emotions of market is going to go ahead. It is going to go ahead a lot. Some are with a view that it might come down. So what is Nippon Balance Advantage Fund and how do you see this currently?
Sure.
With the market conditions?
Sure. So just like I mentioned before, our Balance Advantage Fund, which is the Nippon India Balance Advantage Fund, we purely go with an objective model जहाँ पे जो एसेट एलोकेशन है कि इक्विटी में कितना रखना चाहिए, ये प्योरली मॉडल के बेसिस पे ही हम डिटरमाइन करते हैं. सो मॉडल हैज 4 इंपॉर्टेंट क्राइटेरियाज विच वी लुक एट. सो वन इज मार्केट वैल्यूएशंस, जहाँ पे हम फॉरवर्ड पी देखते हैं टू गेट अ सेंस कि कहाँ पे वैल्यूएशन है, एंड दैट इज द लार्ज पार्ट ऑफ द वेटेज इन टर्म्स ऑफ द मॉडल. अधिकतर इसके बेसिस पे ही पूरा मॉडल चलता है. इसके साथ साथ वी थॉट सिर्फ वैल्यूएशन से यू विल नॉट बी एबल टू गेट अ कंप्लीट हैंग ऑफ थिंग्स, बिकॉज देयर आर टाइम्स व्हेन मार्केट सेंटिमेंट कैन बी वेरी पॉजिटिव, which could be very difficult, very different from the valuations. For example, today, valuations might look expensive from a historical perspective, but market momentum or market sentiment could be a little bit different from that. So we also look at market sentiment, but these are local indicators. But we know how today, how the global markets also a very, very big influence when it comes to our own equity markets. खास करके US markets का बहुत बड़ा influence है. तो हम लोग इसके लिए currency भी देखते हैं कि डॉलर का मूवमेंट बेसिकली कैसा है वर्ल्ड वाइड, इज डॉलर स्ट्रेंथनिंग और वीकनिंग. तो बहुत सिंपल अंडरस्टैंडिंग है इसमें कि अगर डॉलर जब भी स्ट्रेंथन होता है, इट इज नॉट ग्रेट फॉर एमर्जिंग मार्केट्स इंक्लूडिंग इंडिया एंड वाइस वर्सा. एंड द अदर पैरामीटर आल्सो व्हिच वी लुक एट इज टू ट्राई एंड गेज द ग्लोबल सेंटिमेंट. So just like we look at domestic sentiment, we also look at 3 important commodities worldwide to get a sense. For example, US housing market का view क्या है, ओवरऑल कैपेक्स पे व्यू क्या है लोगों का, इन टर्म्स ऑफ स्पेंडिंग क्या व्यू है. सो वी लुक एट कॉपर, वी लुक एट लंबर, वी लुक एट निकल. सो दिस आर ऑल 3 डिफरेंट मार्केट्स. वी गेट अ गुड सेंटिमेंट काइंड ऑफ अंडरस्टैंडिंग. तो इससे क्या होता है कि वी आर एबल टू गेट अ गुड हैंग ऑफ थिंग्स एज टू व्हाट इज एन ऑप्टिमल इक्विटी एलोकेशन. So this helps us, just like what you said very, very rightly. Today, it is very difficult for anybody to understand or take a very objective call कि यहाँ पे मेरा टारगेट हो चुका है, let me cut equities or even to increase equities. Not an easy task. But using all these parameters, we believe it will be helping us to look at the markets with a slightly different perspective. And we have seen this happening time and again. In fact, जब भी हम इक्विटी की बात करते हैं और हम खास करके बहुत क्लीशेड एग्जांपल देते हैं हम लोग कि ग्लास हाफ फुल या हाफ एम्प्टी, तो ये हमेशा इक्विटी के केस में इज ऑलवेज राइट, because always you will have two viewpoints in the equity markets. So which is why we use this model, which is very, very objective, trying to help us out as to what an optimal allocation is. खास करके इस टाइम के लिए ऐसे strategy can be very, very useful for a lot of investors who are not able to decide or who can easily get swayed by the market movements. For instance, as I told you, कि 2020 में we saw so many SIP getting stopped. In fact, net flows in the industry on the equity side was negative for a long period of time. People were actually redeeming when the markets were down because they had seen 2-3 years of very difficult situation. 2018 से लेके 20 mid तक returns were hardly made, negative returns था काफी time. So all this leads to this kind of a behavior. So we think in today's context, a balanced advantage fund, or in fact any other time also, this is something which is an all-weather kind of fund, because across market conditions, if you're seeking something debt plus kind of returns and lower than equity volatility, this is an ideal product for those set of investors. So here I'll just give you one example. For example, in the month of May rather, we were about 50% into net equities in this particular product. और आज हमारा equity allocation करीबन 37% पे है. So what it tells you is we have reduced. But I'm saying it is very difficult for somebody to take a call. For example, November last year we were 57.
Okay.
तो शायद उस टाइम पे बहुत ही मुश्किल था किसी को कॉल लेना कि कितना इक्विटी रखना चाहिए, या कोई बोलता था कि रिटर्न अच्छा बन गया, जैसा हमने कहा कि अधिकतर ट्रेंड था कि पीपल वर रिडीमिंग, somebody would have actually moved out of equities completely. Whereas this product somewhere gives you that thing that you will still maintain a reasonable allocation. Your return output from a medium term perspective will be something which is very satisfactory for an investor.
Okay. So, sir, can I just make it very simple? Matlab, currently, if I see your strategy more like the way the market goes up, you are reducing your equity exposure, and the way market is falling, you would be increasing that. That is the strategy you would be following somewhat.
Correct. That is the strategy most of the times. But as I told you, there are slight differentiation. क्योंकि क्या होता है, कभी कभी मार्केट ऊपर जाते हुए भी आपको शायद इक्विटी एलोकेशन थोड़ा ज्यादा रखना पड़ेगा, because the possibility of it going higher is slightly there, which is why we look at 3 other parameters apart from valuation. I'll give you some example. खास करके जो investors कुछ टाइम से इक्विटीज के अंदर इन्वेस्ट कर रहे हैं, ट्रेड कर रहे हैं, they would know 2013 एक यूनिक मार्केट था. 2013 में वैल्यूएशंस काफी सस्ती हो गई थी मार्केट के, because we had seen a lot of challenges globally and domestically at that point of time. But the markets did not do well. So at that point of time, if you looked at these investor sentiment, it was quite low. So valuations were very cheap. If you had just gone with valuations, you would have actually kept equities very, very high. But return which you would have made that year would have been suboptimal on the equities. And it's like reverse example at 2017 में. When valuations were reasonably high, so models would have told you कि आप एकदम ही कम equity रखना है यहाँ पे. If the model only went with valuation. But if you looked at the sentiment of investment, it was very, very strong, because we had seen 2016 a lot of reforms happening and people were actually willing to look at alternatives, including equities at that point of time in a very, very big way. And the markets actually gave much higher returns despite the relatively higher valuation. So that is where we think the model which we run will help us strike a balance. So it doesn't necessarily mean कि अगर markets बढ़ता हुआ भी equities कम होगा. आज की तारीख में ऐसा situation है कि तीन parameter थोड़ा muted है, negative है, which is why the allocation is low. But as I said, just about 3 months back in the month of May, we were at 50% equities, correct? And valuations are not too different from then and now. It's just that some of the other indicators have become slightly weak compared to then. So that is how this will be maneuvered. So we think that helps us have a better balance to this whole thing.
Okay. So currently, so again, my next question is with regards to what is your recommendation with regards to an investor investing in Nippon India Balance Advantage Fund, whether he should be going for an SIP or a lump sum amount, and if lump sum, do we suggest an STP or not?
Sure.
What is your stand?
Sure. So typically, an investor who is coming into this product category is one who is seeking better than debt returns, is what we understand. At the same time, he doesn't like the volatility of normal equities, क्योंकि equity में कभी +20 या -10 भी हो सकता है. So that kind of a thing. So ideally for an investor here, it doesn't matter whether he comes through lump sum, SIP, STP. That's more of convenience of the investor, and in case the investor feels the investor feels more comfortable with. Because यहाँ पे reallocation happens on a monthly basis. What we do is we rebalance the equity allocation on a monthly basis. and if need be intra month also भी करते हैं अगर कुछ बड़ा event हो जाता है accordingly if you want to change something we basis the model we will still go with that kind of changes. So given this kind of a management which is very dynamic and very fluid, even a lump sum investor can actually come in and park his lump sum money here, because as I said, today our equity level is only 37 in this particular product on the net basis, correct? So that is the benefit an investor is getting here. So they can participate through the mode which they are more comfortable with. But ideally, we think even lump sum can be considered. There's no real need to split the money here.
Okay, okay. Sir, with regards to the time frame, so like if a person is investing 100 rupees, just for an example,
Sure,
what
sure.
is the time frame you would expect the investor to withhold the investment in BAF?
Sure. So this is something which can be considered from a real long-term perspective as well. क्योंकि जो overall asset allocation में बात करते हैं investor की, उसमें कहीं ना कहीं थोड़ा part होता है which is more stable kind of investment which they want from a longer term period of time. So that is where this kind of product comes in. But even in normal case, somebody with a 2-year plus horizon can look at this product category. So ideally, anything beyond 1 year, anyways, even from a taxation becomes more attractive. Long term हो जाता है आपका जो भी gains बनता है. And also क्या finally आपका underlying investments largely equity में ही होता है. So you will have some kind of volatility, zero volatility तो नहीं है यहाँ पे, correct? So आपका अगर 2 साल का horizon है कम से कम, then it helps you tide over this kind of slightly up and down kind of market phases. So consider it from a 2 years plus kind of scenario. We have done a lot of back testing also as to simulation. Obviously, the product का 3.5 साल ही है, लेकिन we have done back testing over the last 10-15 years. And ideally, we think 24 months plus is the ideal scenario for this kind of a product.
Okay. Sir, one more thing I would like to share with you with regards to the mindset of the investors. So definitely they want clarification with regards to that. Sir, we have seen couple of companies in last couple of years wherein there are many issues going on. Still, I would say. So Vodafone is one of the example. ILNFS. Yes, bank. So, which is a bit scary for the investors as they
Right.
feel that, if something happens like this in my fund, then what? So, sir, can you just tell us the impact if something happens? If let's take an example that in your BAF product, one of the script has become an NPA or something like that. What is the impact on the fund, and
Sure.
how do you see that?
Sure. See, you're absolutely right. There have been few events which has happened in the recent past, but what most of the investors don't understand or probably will not have that kind of access to information is the markets went through a very difficult phase at that particular point of time. So there were a lot of worries happening. So bankers were typically not willing to lend because of various reasons. NPA concerns were quite high. So some of the businesses which were reasonably good, even they struggled in terms of managing their finances. Also, there was this slight crisis on the NBFC side, which happened in a very sharp manner. So this kind of phases do not happen with a regular frequency. So even from an Indian MF industry perspective, we have seen this over the last 20-25 years of time. Probably this kind of phase happened only now, where we had this 2-3 years of slightly difficult, challenging kind of period. So we don't think it will be a regular occurrence. We think a large part of the balance sheets today are cleaned. In fact, that's how we can see the NPA worry also has come down significantly. So we don't foresee such events happening with regularity, one. Secondly, all of us keep learning and we will be very humble here and accept that there could be mistakes which could have happened in the past and there are always learnings which one can use going forward. So all these incidents have made us even more focus, even more deep dive into our processes, try to ensure that we built in as much as safety measures into our processes. So all that has been taken care of. Having said that, are we saying 100% no risk? No, we don't know. But we think a large part of some of this risk we have taken care of through our processes, through our risk mitigation techniques. Also, when it comes to a product like Balance Advantage Fund, the focus here is to have very, very high grade kind of investments. And our own view is you will not see these kind of challenges, or not to that extent for some of these challenges which we had seen in the last couple of years in some of these very, very high grade kind of names. So that is what we keep doing, and this is a regular process. So our own belief is we have learned quite a bit from this kind of market happenings which happened in the past. And with a product like BAF, once again to reiterate, there is a lot of, it's a conservative product. So both the portfolios which we run, the equity as well as the fixed income component, we try to be as conservative as possible within that space. Also to add the fixed income portion जो हमारा BAF के अंदर है, वहां से इसकी हम कोशिश नहीं करते कि हमको कुछ एक्स्ट्रा रिटर्न बनना चाहिए. फिक्स्ड इनकम इसके लिए है कि स्टेबिलिटी लैंड करेगा पोर्टफोलियो को, और जो रिटर्न है वो इक्विटी से बनेगा. तो उस हिसाब से हमारे एंड से तो हमको लग रहा है कि यहाँ पे कुछ बड़ा चैलेंज नहीं दिखना चाहिए from an investor's perspective.
Okay. Sir, with regards to the debt portion which you mentioned, sir, can you tell me the comparison between the Nippon BAF versus FD or bonds in the current market which are going on? So even if I talk about perpetual bonds, which are a bit volatile, again with the CRISIL ratings. So yeah, so what is your view? Like if I invest 100 in BAF and 100 in bonds, so according to you, like what would be suitable for the investors?
Sure. See, there are 2-3 things. So as an advisor, you understand it much better कि पहला बात तो investor का risk appetite कैसा है, because that is a very, very crucial aspect. Even with balance advantage fund, we try to keep the equity allocation very, very dynamic depending upon the market fluctuations. Nevertheless, equity का जो range है, it is between 30 to 80%, 30 to 85% kind of range for this particular product. तो कहीं ना कहीं थोड़ा बहुत तो equity का risk यहाँ पे होगा आपको. So थोड़ा बहुत volatility आपको दिखेगी vis-a-vis pure debt, pure fixed income kind of products. But as I said, somebody going to look at from a 2-3 year perspective. One, potentially they should be able to outperform the fixed income kind of products. And secondly, taxation advantage comes in because it enjoys an equity taxation. So typically anything above 1 year, the long-term capital gains tax rate also is much, much lower. So even from on a post-tax basis, this will be reasonably attractive. Also, we have seen that how over a very long period of time, equities, volatilities in equities actually comes down from a longer period investment perspective. So typically somebody who's invested for 5 years, 10 years, the experience would have been much better because most of those volatilities gets you could say averaged out. So even that benefit will rub onto a product like BAF. So our own sense is that somebody is looking at from a medium-term perspective, this product category has the potential to outperform pure fixed income kind of products, plus the taxation benefit which it can offer to the investor. So basically downside protection and reasonable participation on the upside of equities. That's the USP which the product category has.
Okay. So moving ahead with respect to the 10-year GSEC, which is, I guess, 6.2, 6.3.
Right.
Yeah. So, sir, don't you feel that the debt market is right now underperforming? And what is your view with regards to the debt market? Because when I speak about balance advantage fund, you have a combination of equity and debt. And the debt market currently across the industry, whether it is NF or you go for a direct debt products, it is not somewhere more than 7%. So coming to the inflation part, I would say that the debt market is not even, beating the inflation. So what is your view with regards to that? Because if I talk, that's right now with 37% in equity and 67% in debt. So I would be expecting a lower returns since your more exposure is in the debt. So, sir, can you elaborate on the debt market as well?
Sure. So a couple of things. Let me first give a view on debt markets. You are absolutely right. Today, the real rates are negative in India for a reason, because that's what the policymakers want it to be. क्योंकि यहाँ पे कोशिश है कि ग्रोथ को रिवाइव करे, तो उसको एनकरेज करने के लिए रियल रेट्स को नेगेटिव रखा गया है. शायद काफी समय के बाद हमने इंडिया में रियल रेट्स नेगेटिव देखा है. सो दैट इज एक्चुअली encouraging a lot of entrepreneurs to come to the market, borrow at much lower rates, and get the growth cycle coming back. But we think this also will change with time, and you could see the rates moving up at some point of time. But as I said, in case of the balance advantage fund, it's a very, very conservative product category. यहाँ पे हम 1.5 से 2.5 years के बीच में ड्यूरेशन के रेंज में ही रखते हैं, तो काफी शॉर्टर एंड पे ही रखते हैं, तो जिससे कि अगर रेट में बढ़ोतरी भी होती है, रेट हाइक भी होता है, that impact is much lesser on the fixed income portfolio. Also, we maintain very, very high grade kind of investments. कम से कम 80% इन्वेस्ट करते हैं AAA, AA+ जिसे नाम में, तो वहां पे भी कोशिश है कि जितना वॉलेटिलिटी है उसको कम से कम रखें डेट के अंदर. तो आगे चल के अगर रेट हाइक होगा तो भी उसका कुछ बड़ा असर नहीं होगा इसके अंदर. बट द सेकेंड पॉइंट विच यू मेड इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. Can this product consistently beat inflation? Because that is what we are looking at. As you rightly said, some of the product categories which are relatively safer or less volatile today are not able to outperform the inflation on a reasonable basis. But what today we are seeing is a slightly different kind of scenario. Is the fact that if you look at the nominal GDP growth, जिसके साथ हम इक्विटीज की भी तुलना कर सकते हैं कि जनरली इक्विटी में एक थंब रूल्स के हिसाब से हम देखते हैं कि अगर आपका नॉमिनल जीडीपी का ग्रोथ कितना है, उसके हिसाब से अर्निंग्स में बढ़ोतरी होगी, उसके हिसाब से कहीं ना कहीं मार्केट में रिटर्न्स की पॉसिबिलिटी है आपको इक्विटीज के अंदर. दैट लुक्स रीजनेबली प्रॉमिसिंग. सो वी थिंक पॉसिबली यू विल हैव lower double digit kind of numbers, early teen kind of numbers on that lines on the equity side. And also this current exposure of 39% or 37% rather, sorry, of net equity exposure is very dynamic. So just about 3 months back, we were at 50. Today, we are at 37. So even now, there's a possibility that the valuations have some kind of a change. Either the market correction happens or the earning estimates gets revised upwards. You could see a big change in terms of the net equity allocation, and probably for the average for the year still could be higher. So we might end up at 45-50% average equity allocation. So still that potential is there, and that is where the active element comes in. Also, the other point is it is just not indexing. So when it comes to equity allocation, जो हम portfolio बनाते हैं यहाँ पे, वो केवल index को copy नहीं करते, वहाँ पे कुछ active calls भी fund manager यहाँ पे कोशिश करते हैं, ताकि उसमें भी थोड़ा बहुत alpha create कर पाए from a medium term perspective. So all this will help this product, as I said, at least 2 years plus के हिसाब से, कि डेट में जो रिटर्न्स बनते हैं या फिक्स्ड इनकम में जो रिटर्न्स बनते हैं, उससे कहीं ना कहीं थोड़ा बहुत बेहतर कर पाए. एट द सेम टाइम इक्विटी की तरह वॉलेटिलिटी नहीं दे इन्वेस्टर को.
ओके, सो सर इक्विटी मार्केट को लेके व्हाट इज योर व्यू फॉर अ पीरियड ऑफ से 1 year, 2 year or 5 years horizon from here? Are you bullish, bearish, or just holding on?
So we are optimistic on the prospects for the equity side, and to be honest, ना तो हम bull है ना bear है, तो हमको लगता है कि practical होना better है, because markets को एक habit है जो कहीं ना कहीं, as they say, markets keep making us more and more humble, because हम जितना समझने की कोशिश करते हैं, मार्केट में कुछ ऐसा इवेंट या टर्न हो जाता है जो विच इज कंप्लीटली अनप्रेडिक्टेबल. सो द आइडिया इज कि रेगुलरली आप अपना एसेट एलोकेशन चेक करते रहे. जैसा इन्वेस्टर के लिए आप अपने एडवाइजर के थ्रू कोशिश कीजिएगा कि जितना हो सके आप जो आपके गोल्स है उसके आप स्टिक करें. फ्रॉम इक्विटी मार्केट पर्सपेक्टिव, प्योरली अगर ऑब्जेक्टिवली देखेंगे, हम काफी सारे जो चीज हम हमेशा मांग करते थे एज एन इन्वेस्टर ऑफ इक्विटीज की, इंटरेस्ट रेट रिलेटिवली कम रहे, लिक्विडिटी आसान रहे मार्केट के अंदर, ग्रोथ सपोर्टिव मेजर्स, पॉलिसी मेजर्स हो गवर्नमेंट की तरफ से, ये सारे चीज आज हमको दिख रहा है. ग्लोबली भी हमको दिख रहा है कि जो कैपेक्स एक्टिविटीज है या फिर जो स्पेंडिंग है मैन्युफैक्चरिंग की तरफ, उनमें काफी फोकस है. US is having a very big focus on infra kind of area. We can see Japan and a lot of other developed nations also looking at huge boost to infra. In our own economy, we are seeing today how the government is trying to push the manufacturing activities in a very big way. PLI incentives हमने देखा ही है, taxation में कुछ relaxation हुआ है corporates के लिए, ये हो रहा है एक hand में. दूसरे hand में we could see consumption is coming back. Even the pandemic today, we hope it continues this way. The numbers are improving, vaccination rate is going up, so the business confidence today is improving, even consumption levels is improving. So all this points to a reasonable growth recovery in India, which should augur very, very well from a medium term perspective. very near term, possibly next 1 year is too difficult to call. We don't know. See, there could be that the market rally has been very strong over the last 12 months. तो थोड़ा बहुत consolidation natural है, कभी ना कभी होगा. किस कारण से होगा, nobody can define. But it could happen. It could be local. It could be global. We don't know. But we will have to be prepared for that kind of a volatility. But we remain very constructive on equities from a 3-5 year perspective. We think all the key factors seems to be pointing towards a reasonable recovery from an Indian context. Even global growth is in a very, very good space. So India से उससे काफी बड़ा linkage है. तो estimate किया गया है कि करीबन 40 से 50% 40 to 50% of our earnings are linked to global growth, global markets. So even that will be a very big benefit to corporates. Also, all this shift which is happening from unorganized to organized is playing very well for the corporates which are in the listed space, and which is what stock market is tracking. So we think the key ingredient जो stock market के लिए जो हम बोलते हैं ना पेट्रोल है, जो जिससे मार्केट की गाड़ी चलती है, वो earnings है. तो earnings का जो व्यू है वो काफी पॉजिटिव है अभी के लिए. मीडियम टर्म पर्सपेक्टिव से भी काफी सारे जो सेक्टर्स पहले पार्टिसिपेट नहीं कर रहे थे, आज उनमें काफी अच्छी हेल्थी सिचुएशन है. So all this makes us reasonably positive from the equity side, but a word of caution, near term is very difficult to predict. Volatile रह सकता है, and which is why people who are not very savvy in terms of risk appetite and who would be more conservative, उनके लिए balance advantage जैसा category is a much better space to look at.
Sorry, you mentioned about the petrol of the stock market. So right now, AMCs are being called the petrol of the stock market. One of the investors recently texted me that thoda bhi girta hai, mutual fund industry is with lots of money and they are investing like anything. Is it true?
You know better. So at times what happens is people just look at some of the recent new offerings and they think कि काफी flows हो रहा है. But if you look at it, काफी सारे लोग अपना portfolio reallocate भी कर रहे हैं. तो net ऐसा नहीं कि mutual funds is still relatively a smaller player within the gamut. If you look at the large investors, the institutional investors, both on domestic as well as on the foreign side, compared to them, mutual fund is relatively small in terms of scale. But the good part is with all the effort of people like you who have done over the years and educated that how people should not really get only swayed by market movements and should keep building their assets in a regular manner to SIPs, STPs. All these are becoming a habit among investors. So which is, we are very thankful to that, and that is helping that people keep investing in a very, very disciplined manner.
So I forgot to ask you one thing about the Nippon India Balance Advantage Fund. What is the AUM size currently this fund holds?
Yeah,
in the
as of end
market?
of as of end of August, this fund is 4,300 crores. So 4328 is the number as of end of August.
Okay, okay. So moving ahead with the things which we discussed, what kind of investors do you feel are eligible to invest in Balance Advantage Fund?
So as I mentioned earlier, also people who are having a time horizon of at least 2 years plus and are seeking better than pure fixed income kind of returns, but they don't want an equity volatility because that can scare them. So for all those set of investors, this is an ideal product category. Also, people who are investing into equities for the first time, पहले कभी नहीं किया, यूजुअली वो लोग फिक्स्ड इनकम जैसे प्रोडक्ट्स में रहते थे, तो सेफ्टी सिक्योरिटी था वहां पे कि रीजनेबल जो प्रेडिक्टेबिलिटी था वहां पे, पहले बार इक्विटीज की तरफ आए हैं, तो उनको एक्सपोजर देने के लिए दिस कैटेगरी इज गुड बिकॉज वी थिंक एक्सपीरियंस जो इन्वेस्टर को मिलेगा यहाँ पे, दैट शुड बी रीजनेबली बेटर because even in situations where market correct by a reasonable number, this product category should offer them some kind of a downside protection. At the same time, upside you will not miss out completely. So that in our belief makes a much better experience. In fact, इस चीज पे काफी सारा स्टडीज किया गया है वर्ल्ड वाइड कि नॉर्मली जो इन्वेस्टर जो रिटर्न देखता है अपना, जैसा अभी ग्रोथ फंड का आपने मेंशन किया था पहले, तो उसमें करीबन 10 रुपए से 2,000 रुपए तक का जो नैव का ग्रोथ है, कितने इन्वेस्टर्स ने उसको देखा होगा, बिकॉज लॉट ऑफ इन्वेस्टर्स वुड हैव कम एंड गॉन एंड नॉट हैड द सेम काइंड ऑफ एक्सपीरियंस.
Correct.
तो कहीं ना कहीं वो इमोशनल जो एंगल हम बोलते हैं ना कि फाइनली हम लोग सब इंडिविजुअल है, तो हमारा नेचुरली थॉट प्रोसेस है, सो दैट प्लेस एंड अपना जो डिसिप्लिन है उसमें कहीं ना कहीं इंपैक्ट होता है, विच इज वेरी नेचुरल. So
Which is
here
not.
is a here is a product category which gives you that inbuilt discipline. So wherein it keeps moving the equity allocation up and down. So typically for all those people who feel कि मैं खुद से नहीं कर पाऊंगा, it's difficult for me in terms of moving the allocation, this product gives you an automated solution. So we think it should be part of every investor's core portfolio. In fact, this is something which can gel with all investors' portfolio, but ideal for somebody who's just starting exposure into equities, ideal for somebody who is little conservative in terms of their risk appetite, but still seeks better than pure fixed income kind of returns.
Okay. Sir, one question with regards to the again on the investor front. Like if we look at this fund from a perspective of at least 10 to 15 years,
Right,
whether in the form of SIP or a lump sum investment, whether
right.
for a retirement purpose or whether for child's education or child's marriage. Uh, so what is your view? Because since being a less volatile product and with a combination of debt, money market products, so if the investor is stay invested, so at the time of goal, can we expect that there won't be a negative returns at least
Yeah, that is what we have seen.
for a time horizon of 10 to 15 years?
Absolutely, absolutely. I get your point. In fact, we have done some number crunching on this. What we did was जो सेंसेक्स के 40 ईयर का जो हिस्ट्री है 1980 से लेके 2020-2021 तक का जो हिस्ट्री है, इस दौरान हमने एक रोलिंग रिटर्न का एनालिसिस किया था. वी डिड रोलिंग रिटर्न्स ऑन 1, 3, 5, 7 and 10 years. So what does it mean? It means any investor who had invested into say Sensex at any point of time during the last 40 years and stayed invested for at least 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 7 year, 10 years, what was the average possibilities which the investor could have seen? So therein, very interestingly, 5, 7 and 10 years में जो investors invest किए थे equities के अंदर, उनका जो experience है from a negative return perspective is very less. In fact, 10 years में मेरे ख्याल से 1% से भी कम है कि negative returns किसी ने देखा होगा. And even 5, 7 years, it's very high in terms of positive returns is 94, 95% plus. So
Okay.
the possibility of somebody seeing a positive return on equities itself is increases significantly anything above 5 years. At least
Okay.
experientially, anecdotally ये बोल सकते हैं हम सेंसेक्स का 40 ईयर का हिस्ट्री which is reasonably long, हमने बहुत सारे ups and downs देखे हैं इस दौरान. So that gives us some kind of a idea as to what is possible with equities. With fixed income, we know that that from a longer term perspective, chances of you seeing a negative return is very, very less. Almost zero, you could say, but technically almost zero नहीं बोल सकते. तो उससे थोड़ा कम ही होगा, but the chances of losing money there is very, very less. So ideally, the chances of somebody seeing a negative return from a 10, 15 year is very, very unlikely in a product category like PAF. In fact, we think over that time period, it should give you inflation plus kind of returns. So that is another plus point where it comes in, because a lot of times people miss out on the inflation front कि हमारा returns fixed तो है या secured तो है reasonably, लेकिन क्या inflation को beat कर पाएगा? Whereas this product ideally should be able to deliver something plus inflation. So in that sense, you are absolutely right. People can look at it from a long-term goal planning kind of scenario. And also people can look at it as a more stable part of the overall allocation. So even from a long-term planning, you as an advisor, you would know much better than me कि आप अलग-अलग तरह के प्रोडक्ट्स वहां पे भी देखते हो. आप सिंगल प्रोडक्ट से आप लॉन्ग टर्म गोल प्लानिंग नहीं करते हो, तो उसमें से शायद एक हिस्सा, एक पोर्शन you can allocate to a product like balance advantage.
Okay. Sir, can we see balance advantage in the form of SWP for few range of customers?
Sure.
What would be your call with regards to SWP? That is one thing. Secondly, would you recommend it for lump sum investments done or through an SIP? So,
Sure.
मान लीजिए there is an investor, he might be requiring funds after 2 years, a fixed income kind of thing. So
Right.
for that, we do opt for SWP. Now, right now, he wants to invest, say, 1 crore. And he wants to get SWP after a year or 2 years. What is your call? How should we go ahead with it?
Sure. So you're right. So there are a lot of investors who might need regular income also, especially people who possibly are in the post-retirement kind of scenario, seeking regular income, or even the people who are in the working age but require some kind of regular income to supplement from their investments. So therein SWP could be a very interesting measure. But as you rightly mentioned, ideally जब कोई इन्वेस्ट करता है कम से कम 1-2 साल का टाइम फ्रेम देना चाहिए प्रोडक्ट को, ताकि आपका एक्चुअल गेन्स बने, फिर आप SWP शुरू करें. क्या होता है कि अगर आप इन्वेस्ट करते हो तुरंत SWP ऑप्ट करते हैं, तो naturally some part of it will come from your capital itself. So which is not very ideal from an investor perspective. That is point number one. Second is SWP आप जब अमाउंट ऑप्ट करते हो, परसेंटेज ऑप्ट करते हो, तो कहीं ना कहीं आपको ये भी ध्यान रखना पड़ेगा कि आपका एक्सपेक्टेशन बहुत ज्यादा नहीं हो, क्योंकि आप 10% से विड्रॉ करोगे तो हो सकता है कि कुछ सिचुएशन में, कुछ फेजेस में मार्केट, इक्विटी मार्केट से वॉलेटिलिटी ज्यादा रहेगी, रिटर्न सब ऑप्टिमल रहे, तो आप अपना कैपिटल से ले रहे हो उसको, तो विच इज नॉट आइडियल फ्रॉम अ इन्वेस्टर पर्सपेक्टिव. So ideally investors should have some reasonable number, possibly they should take कि आपका रिस्क फ्री रिटर्न जो डेट के अंदर जो बन रहा है, या फिर जो जीसेक आपने बोला जीसेक का रेट इतना इतना यील्ड है, समथिंग लाइक दैट, ऐसा कुछ आप बेंचमार्क लेके आप चल सकते हो कि उस रेट तक आप SWP कीजिए, और that will be very good from a longer term perspective, will ensure that your capital gets built from a longer term perspective. So that is how one should evaluate this particular thing. सो वी थिंक SWP आइडियली आप 1 साल से ऊपर ही शुरू कीजिएगा, कम से कम 1 साल तक वेट करके थोड़ा कैपिटल बिल्ड होने दीजिए, आपका रिटर्न बनने दीजिए, और वहां से शुरू कीजिए. दैट कैन लास्ट यू फॉर अ फेयरली लॉन्ग टाइम, इज व्हाट वी बिलीव, एंड इफ द रिटर्न एक्सपेक्टेशन शुड आल्सो बी रीजनेबल.
But what is the percentage, like you mentioned out, 10% withdrawal
Yeah.
can destroy the capital.
Yeah.
Now let's talk in a way that if the investor wants certain amount, as
Yeah.
well as he wants his money to grow, both
Yeah.
the ways.
Yeah.
So what is the ideal SWP amount yearly you would recommend the percentage to get
Yeah.
it withdrawn?
Yeah. See, basically, as I said, it is something which we'll have to look at what is possible from a pure fixed income kind of returns which you are expecting today. So say benchmark roughly today, you can in today's context, you could say somebody should, if they're looking for SWP, should look at maybe a 6% kind of number, 5.5%, 6% kind of number, which is closer to the risk-free kind of return, which is possible. So that should be your ideal withdrawal amount, so that you give your portfolio enough space to grow as well, and this can be maintained over a longer period of time. So that is how one should start evaluating when you look at this. Also, if you do in this manner, we think this withdrawal can last for a really long time, because as thumb rule goes, and as I said कि nominal GDP जो है उसके आसपास आपका equity का return बनता है normally from a medium term perspective, तो कहीं ना कहीं उसका भी benefit आपको दिखेगा इस part of the portfolio में, जहाँ पे 50-60% के average में equity होगा इसके अंदर, is what we believe. So that much benefit you will get. So this can possibly give you a few basis points over and above pure fixed income kind of return. So this kind of a withdrawal would be ideal.
Okay. Sir, as you mentioned out in the earlier part that the equity ranges from 30 to 85%. Can we expect that it can, at some given point of time, the fund manager might go up to 85% on the equity front?
It can happen. So it will be very exceptional kind of circumstances where everything looks really good. So that is slightly difficult, because what happens is at that point of time, the valuation has to be very cheap. And the other parameters which we look at from a sentiment indicator point of view, that has to be very positive. So it normally doesn't happen in that frequency, but yes, it can happen. You never know, but whatever backtesting we have done it for about 10 years plus. That suggests that somewhere it can be as high as 75 also, 75-80. So that range is possible.
Okay. Okay. Sir, one last question from my end. What is the IRR you would be a rough example, like if an investor stays for 3 to 5 years of horizon, what is the expectation he can at least have? A range, I would say.
Yeah. So in mutual fund, everything is relative. So it is always relative to what some of the
because that is the first question which an investor asks. What is the return?
Correct.
So overall, what do you see from your up to next 3 to 5 years of span? What is an investor would be earning?
Sure. As I said, today, when we look at least from a broader view perspective, we are reasonably optimistic that equity markets and the growth possibilities are reasonably strong. So equity markets or equity allocation, which will be a primary part of this portfolio itself, so that should do reasonably well, which should augur well for a product like Balance Advantage also, and that benefits would rub on. As a thumb rule basis, no commitment here, no guarantee here, but as a thumb rule basis, on a steady state, longer term kind of time frame, this product category should be able to outperform fixed income kind of space by anywhere between 200 to 300 basis points. So that is what somebody should take as a reference point, and look at and evaluate this category. So plus the taxation benefits, which anyways comes being an equity kind of product. So that is what one can expect on a slightly medium term kind of time frame.
Okay. Sir, any special thing you would like to share with our investors?
Sure. So basically what we have seen and what we have observed, and this I'm speaking more at an individual, at my own personal experience. So we get we tend to make wrong choices when it comes to investments, largely led by the market events, because they can be very, very difficult to understand, and it can naturally play on our minds. So which is where we obviously need to do two important things. One is try to keep a very disciplined kind of investments, try to rebalance our assets, take help maybe from advisors to do that. And then there are obviously product categories like the balance advantage, which comes in, because herein that human bias is taken out completely from allocation perspective. We purely go with मॉडल के अंदर जो आंकड़े आते हैं उसके बेसिस पे आप इक्विटी के एलोकेशन या डेट में कितना रखना चाहिए उस पे आप डिटरमाइन करते हो. तो एक लर्निंग है कि जो विश्व स्तर पे जो हुआ है ऐसे प्रोडक्ट कैटेगरीज को लेके, कहीं ना कहीं उसमें एक बेनिफिट भी मिलता है इन्वेस्टर्स को. सो ट्राई टू लुक एट फ्रॉम दैट पर्सपेक्टिव, एंड वी थिंक दिस कैन बी मोर ऑफ आई कुड से, जैसा हम बोलते हैं कि हर पोर्टफोलियो में कुछ कोर होता है, कुछ टैक्टिकल होता है फ्रॉम अ इन्वेस्टर्स पर्सपेक्टिव. So this category can be part of the core allocation which an investor does, and this can be a reasonably steady kind of category which somebody can look at. So it helps us कहीं ना कहीं जो हम mistakes करते हैं basis market movements या basis our own thought process, it helps us to eliminate or at least reduce that to a good extent.
Okay. Okay, sir. So, sir, the session which we had today, it was amazing. We had a very detailed description. I would say a detailed product of Balance Advantage Fund. So it is really going to help all our investors for the same. And sir, we hope that we get more and more money for this particular fund. We will try our level best for the same. And as the fund itself is around 4,300 CR currently, and we expect an alpha generated for this particular fund.
Sure.
That's what is the investors'
correct
expectations. And hope we catch up for this kind of things. Thank you, Mr. Rajesh Jayaraman.
Sure.
For sharing this whole idea of Balance Advantage Fund. And if anything, we would get in touch with you. Thanks a lot, sir.
Sure. Thanks, Tamil. Pleasure speaking to you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, sir.